How you doing? This is Sean McVay with Sean's Outdoor Adventures. I want to welcome you to this video in my 2017 hunting season. And I'm going to talk about my map reading challenge. Now, I have been taking out groups of guys on a map reading challenge, which is we look at topo maps and aerial photos, and then we pick out the best spots we think based on topography, and we go there and scout it one time and come back months later to actually hunt it. And this year I've gotten the chance to incorporate the onX app on my phone. And that's been really nice because it shows you where all the trails are on the public land. It shows you where the borders are. And that's one thing that I used to really struggle with. And this is important for you if you're going to be doing map reading challenges or anything like that, or just hunting public land in general. There were plenty of times where I would look at the maps, pick out good spots, and go there to actually hunt without scouting at all. And there would be hiking trails going all over the spots where I had picked. And, I'd have people walking their dogs at prime hunting time, just ruining my whole sit. And so having the app, I've really appreciated that because I can say, okay, let me stay away from where the hiking trails are and focus on the areas where they're not. So anyway, going into this hunting season, I've benefited from that. And it started off I did a map reading challenge in the state of Maryland. The guys that I took there, they couldn't figure out a team name, and they were all strong Christians like I am. So I said, why don't you call yourselves Men of Faith? So that's the name they picked. But when we were there, I was having miserable luck. So the first spot I went to, the wind was not doing what they were predicting. It was doing the worst possible direction. Didn't see any deer in the morning. I tried a spot in the evening. I mean, I would have thought that going into hunting season, they wouldn't have been doing much maintenance and work on the public land. But they had just gone through this whole section and freshly marked all the trees for a logging excursion of some type. And I mean, there was some of the paint on the ground, like blotches of that probably fell out of the pail when they were painting stuff, still partly wet. So, I'm hunting public land, pressured deer. They're usually spooky. So when someone's going all through the woods doing something like that, it throws them all off. Well, that threw off my evening hunt. By the time I got there, it was such a far hike. I was like, I'm not turning back. So I just sat it anyway in case I get lucky. Nothing. The next day was like the bear day. It started off, I heard a deer in the morning and it ran past me. Next thing I know, I look over and there's a bear trailing it. So this bear had chased the deer off. And, all morning long, I'm like, I am hearing bear walking around. That bear went this way. I'm hearing bear where the deer are supposed to be coming from. And it turns out it was these two cubs. It was probably a mom and two cubs, and the mom went running off after that deer. The cubs were hanging out playing, and they were just wrestling with each other around me. And I could hear deer snorting down the hill from me. I mean, just the whole morning was ruined. And walking out, I found this fresh scrape track. I walked out the same way I came in. And there was this fresh line of scrapes that had been laid down probably that morning. The buck just came down the hill and went the other way. So frustrating. And then that evening I went and set up at a new spot. I had never sat there before. And I glance over right after getting set up and I see a fawn kind of trotting up the hill. A little while later, another bear comes off the hill, comes right down to me, and it stops over, to my side, right around where the fawn was, and it sits down, and it's looking down in the valley, and it turns around and leaves, and it goes right underneath me, goes right back to the way it came, and then I hear down in the stream, down at the bottom of the hill, it sounded like, if you've ever seen those videos of brown bears jumping in the streams after the salmon, it was such a loud commotion, and it had to have been a huge black bear, and that had to be the reason why this bear turned and went back, because the wind was coming up the hill to us. And my hunt, again, ruined. And that's been the start of my season. Everything that can go wrong seems to be going wrong. So that was, my Maryland map reading challenge was just, everything was a no-go. And then coming into PA, the Pennsylvania opening day of the season, I went to this spot where I had trail cameras with this really nice, probably a 6.5-year-old 8-point, and I know that the spot's probably the kind of spot that doesn't get good until you get into the rut, But I had plenty of trail camera footage of this buck at different times throughout the summer. And I thought, you know what, maybe he'll just stop by, you know, just to feed on some of the browse and stuff right at this little clearing. And I'll just try it. Well, I get there and it's a 2-mile hike in, and the wind is just blowing the worst possible direction it can possibly blow. So I sat there for about half the day. I got down, left, tried a spot in the evening. Again, total disaster. So now going into the next week, we're back into the next map reading challenge with the Pennsylvania crew. And this is 3 different teams hunting all at the same location. And in the future, I'm going to hunt all of the teams at the same location. It's just the way things developed this year. I didn't get to do that. I think another significant thing that really threw me off going into the Pennsylvania map reading challenge was the night before my string broke on my bow. I think my peep sight got a burr on it and it cut through the string. And Bowtech tried to overnight me a string. I was supposed to leave at 11 in the morning. At 10 in the morning, I was able to get a string from a local pro shop, get it put on. And then I scrambled to get home and get it tuned up, and it wasn't perfectly tuned. And you know, I had to resight the bone a little bit because I couldn't get everything exact, like peep sight, location, and all that stuff. So I was an hour late getting to the map reading challenge from what I wanted to be. I still got there at the same time as most of the guys. But I mean, that was a mental strain as well, and a physical strain, just trying to get it all put together and get there for the hunt. But again, I mean, we got there, we were driving out to the stand, our hunting areas, and there was deer all bouncing around all over the place. As soon as I finished setting up, within like 5 minutes, it just starts pouring rain. And I jumped a bunch of deer right when I got to the location. And the wind was just blowing right into the thicket where I believed all the deer were going to come out of. And I'm thinking, man, terrible conditions. I should just get out of here now before I totally ruin this area with my scent. And maybe if I get out of here quick enough, I can get back in here in the morning when the wind's going to be in my favor and try sitting this. So after sitting in the rain for about 45 minutes and everything getting soaked, I got down.
Talking to my wife, looking at trail camera.
Yeah. All right, end of day 1 just about. I am heading back to base camp. I'm gonna start heating up some, whoa, almost dropped the camera there. I'm gonna start heating up some dinner for these guys. So the next morning I went back, I left my stand in, I had set up my XOP air raid hang-on tree stand that XOP gave me, which I'm really actually thoroughly enjoying. And I left it in, just slipped up in there nice and quiet, sat there, and I must have ruined the spot with the way the wind was blowing right to where the deer were the day before, because the deer did not move through that area at all that morning. And just from experience, I'm sure that's what happened. So that afternoon, I went to just peek at a spot that I was thinking of hunting the next morning, and it looked awesome. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to set up and sit, because the deer have been moving early, and it's been hot. It's been a hot early season, and I hear guys all the time saying, oh, it's so hot, you know, the deer aren't going to be moving. Well, I have to tell you, the deer have been moving like crazy, and early afternoon is when we've had the best movement. And yes, it's hot, but the deer are eating. They're hitting those acorns and the food sources hard, folks. So I don't know. I hear people complaining, but we're seeing the activity.
Just finished climbing up in the tree, my climber. Didn't pull my bow up yet. And I swapped the cameras from this morning. And the bracket that holds the camera onto the camera arm is still on the other camera. So I just set all that up for nothing. I'm not going back now. I'm going to have to rely on this thing to get the shot if I get one. Oh well.
So that evening, as I was at that spot, I'm like, I'm going to just sit the rest of the day here. I get set up, and within a half hour, the wind is just blowing in every direction. It's blowing hard, and I have enough experience to know when that happens, I don't see deer, because they can smell me so far away, and when it's constantly swirling and going in different directions, I'm basically alerting all of the deer all through this region. So especially if you're a new hunter and you're out there hunting, pay close attention to the ways that the wind is blowing throughout the hunt. If it's blowing at any point in a direction you think the deer are coming from or going to come from, you could be in trouble. Like if it does it a little bit, sometimes it'll still work out. And, there's been times where I've had it blowing the whole time in the direction that I thought the deer would come from. And they still came out of the woodwork at the end of the hunt anyway. They just never came all the way in. But usually 99% of the time, I don't see anything. And I hunt in areas where there's not a lot of deer. So if you mess up on one deer, there aren't other deer to come in. Like hunting out in the Midwest where I talk to people who see 30, 40 deer every time they go out, it isn't like that. So if these 10 deer over here wind you, well, there's still 30 or 20 over here that didn't, you might see some. So when you're hunting areas with low numbers of deer, you cannot afford to have the wind blow in the direction the deer might be. So I get down out of the stand, I'm driving around, I'm studying the maps, I pulled out my phone, I was using my onX app on my phone, and I was like, okay, there is a clear cut over here, and that's the only place I can find on the map where the deer won't wind me. So with a clear cut, they're coming out of the woods and stuff to the clear cut to feed on browse. They're not out in the open. And so I went in and I walked up the edge of the clear cut and I'm like, this is the tree I want to be in right here. And I was like, well, the tree's a little leaning too far and I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. So I looked back into the woods about 50 yards and there was very few trees you could get in. And I just had my XOP hang on stand so that I didn't have to worry about if I could find a tree for my climb or not. So I went back into the woods and I got up in a tree. And wouldn't you know it, as it got to be within the last hour of the hunt, I look over and there's a group of doe feeding up the edge of the clear cut right to the tree I wanted to be in. So that was a situation of so close yet so far. The next morning, I decided to do a blind map reading challenge since none of my other spots were working out too well. Just after 4:30 in the morning, turn some light on here. Final day of the map reading challenge, and I am going in blind. I have just never been anywhere in the woods where I'm going to try. Everything was like that right there. I'm so angry right now. I just spent like an hour trying to get into this spot I was going blind to, and it is just, everything is so thick. There was nowhere to shoot, there was nowhere to get set up. It was an absolute disaster. It's now 5:40. That just kills me right there. I don't know what I'm gonna do at this point. That was painful. I am sweating my brains out. Everything you don't want to have happen. Come on, man. So this is like miles and miles of public land. There aren't too many cars out today. My car's parked at the end of this access road that guy just walked down. And I picked this spot just because it's the only thing I had that the wind would work for. So I came down this access trail, got up in this stand. The deer typically come this way. The wind's kind of blowing this way and this way. But anyway, it's like, if you see a car there, why do that? He looked like he had bags of bait or something. I don't know what that guy's doing. You're not allowed to do that.
I don't know.
So that evening, I finally got to go to a spot that I wanted to sit my original sit. The first evening I wanted to sit this spot, but the wind was blowing the wrong direction, so I didn't go there. This evening, the wind is finally blowing in the direction I needed to. I'm gonna sit there. So I go in, and I had a little trouble finding a tree. I actually got up in one tree, and I realized I can't get the shooting lanes that I need out of this tree. I got down and I moved over and got up in a different tree. And I had this button buck come out and feed under me at like 15 yards for a half hour. But the deer was sort of facing me, so I kind of felt like I couldn't move, because after a while I heard a deer coming on the other side of me. And it ended up being about a 1 or a 2-year-old buck. And he had, you know, a little bit of a rack here and almost like a spike here growing on this side. He came and stood broadside to me about 20 yards away, licking a branch and stuff like that. And eventually, when he got around me, I could get the video camera over to him, which I couldn't do before because that button buck is right there. And if I start moving, I didn't want him to spot me and snort and stuff. So I get a little footage of this buck as he kind of moves quickly away and walks up through the woods. But folks, that moment was the biggest relief, because I picked this spot specifically based on the aerial photos and the topo map. So based on topography, I thought deer moving through here will go up this faint draw. Off in the distance, like a 1/4 mile away, was a food plot. And a lot of times buck get to the food plot at or after dark. A lot of your good bucks, especially on public land. So I went a 1/4 mile away, figuring the bucks are going to move through this area while it's still daylight on their way to the food plot. And I nailed it on the head. I mean, this was a partly blind setup here. I had never actually picked out a tree. I had walked through here during the scout, and that's when it started to do the pouring rain. But so I never really got to look at it too carefully. I just like walked in there and the rains hit and I ran back out. But the point is, I nailed it, you know, as far as how the deer would use that area. It just happened to be a younger buck than what I was looking for. I mean, if that was an older buck, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, man, I would have had a shot. So that was exciting. And that was like a relief, you know, after all the bad luck over a month of hunting now. And I'm airing this video because a lot of people have been really pestering me saying, you know, when are you going to air a hunting video? When are you going to air a hunting video? And I'm like, well, I was waiting until I had something to show you, but I decided to put this video together. And lo and behold, after I, you know, compiled a lot of this footage and just didn't record the commentary yet, I went out last night and I harvested my first deer of the season. So in the next video, I'm going to share that harvest with you. But my encouragement to you right now is, you know, you can be a great hunter. And I'm at a point now where it's not a situation where I just get a deer whenever I go out. It's not that way. However, I am good enough to know it's not happening tonight. Meaning, I know what environmental factors I need to be successful. And when those things are out of my control and they're not working in the way that I need them to, I know when things aren't going to happen. And so, you know, there's a skill set there and a depth of knowledge that we acquire through the years of hunting. And a lot of you who watch these videos, and I have so much educational videos, there's still personal experience as one of the best teachers for you being out there. And so just keep at it. And every time you go into the woods, try to learn something from it, especially if it wasn't successful. Why? Why didn't I see any deer tonight? What way was the wind blowing? Where did I expect the deer to be coming from? Was the wind shifting directions? Did it shift at any point in time into the direction that I thought the deer would come from? And it doesn't matter. I mean, there's all kinds of scent elimination products out there. There's like Scent Crusher, Ozonics, all these types of things, in addition to the soaps and the sprays. And I personally am of the mindset, like, it doesn't matter how much you do all that stuff, you still have to get the wind to work. Yeah, there's been times I've hunted and the deer have been downwind of me and I still had an opportunity. But more times than not, that's not the case. And I think the more experience you get out there, the more you might begin to realize, hey, the nights that I didn't see deer, it's because maybe the wind shifted at one point in time and it went to the deer, regardless of all the scent elimination stuff. You can't count on that as the fix-all. And as I'm going to mention in the next video, you're going to hear it twice now, I've been hearing so many people complain that the deer aren't moving because of the heat, and I so disagree. I know the heat impacts the rut activity, but it does not impact the feeding activity, in at least this year and what I've been watching, because the deer have been moving early every day. We've been seeing deer on the hoof at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at extremely high temperatures above the normal. And the point is, if you do everything right, you play the wind right, and you get the right setup, if you're in the evening sit and you're sitting by a primary food source for the deer, whether it's some form of acorn or something else, they're going to be there. That's been my experience this year. So get that stuff out of your head. Oh, it's too hot. I had a friend say to me, he's been using that as his consolation of why he's not getting out hunting. He's like, oh, it's too hot. The deer aren't moving anyway. That's not the case. We have been seeing a lot of deer movement, especially in the evenings, in the heat, going to the food sources, putting on the pounds, putting on the fat, getting ready for the winter. So that's it. Stay tuned in the next episode, because I am going to share with you my first harvest of the year and my first shot at a deer with my new Bowtech Rain 7. So I'm excited to share that with you. Hope you'll stay tuned for that. Until then, take care and God bless.